In this lesson, we'll create a Hello World app. This will show us the building blocks used in creating Android applications. We'll start off by selecting a new project in Visual Studio, and it will be a Mono for Android project and an Android application. And we'll give that project the name Hello World. In Visual Studio, we'll create a number of files for us, but we're going to delete those because we want to actually create this application from scratch. So we'll delete the activity that it created for us, and we will also delete the main layout resource that it created for us. Now, what we're going to start with is we're going to start off with a layout. A layout defines the controls that are used on a UI screen. So we'll create a new one of those, and it will be an Android layout, and we will give it the name main and add that in. So now it's shown to us in the designer, and we're going to use the designer to add a button to it. So we'll go into the toolbox and find the button widget and drag it over into the designer. At this point, we're using the designer, and I'll show you the source code that's created in just a little bit. But we want to give our button a meaningful variable name, or ID. So I'll just call him button hello. And we also want to change the text to be hello world. And you'll note that the designer does update with that information. So now if we take a look at the source code, the first thing you'll notice is that we've got this object called a linear layout. And we'll talk about layouts in a few lessons further on down in the course. But this is the basic container for any kind of widgets or controls that we're going to put on this screen. Within that layout, we've got our button. And you can see that the text property is hello world, and the ID is button hello. We also have a layout width equal to fill parent, and what that means is that whatever screen size we have or orientation, that the button is going to adjust its width so that it fills the entire parent. We also have a layout height, and it's set at wrap content by default, which means that no matter what text we put in or what font we use, the button will adjust its height to fit that content. So now that we have our layout, we're going to add an activity to use that layout. So we add a new item here, and in this case it's going to be an activity, and we'll call it main activity. I like to make my names consistent between my activities and the resources that they use. So I'll add that activity in. And the first thing we need to do, because this activity is going to be the first one that is shown when the application is launched, is we need to give it a main launcher attribute and set that equal to true. The next thing we need to do is we need to define its content, which we're going to use the layout that we just created. And to do that, we set the content view, and we're going to use a resource, and we're going to use the layout resource that we just created and the main layout resource. So now the screen understands that it's going to use the resource, and if we were to run this application now, it would pop up and it would show the button. But we actually want that button to do something. So we're going to create a variable for the button, and then we have to hook that variable to the actual button resource. So we do this by setting it equal to its find view. And we're going to find that view by ID, and you'll note that there are a couple of overrides for that. I prefer to use the templated override. which means that I will have a defined type of button when this method returns. And in this case, I'll be looking for it by ID, so I want the button ID. And you'll note that my button is not actually in the list for IntelliSense. IntelliSense does not pick up the resources until you've actually done a build. So right now I'm going to have an error, but once I build, that will go away. Now I want to set up a click event. And this is where it begins to look a bit more like C#. And we'll just use the tab to generate our click event handler. And all we're going to do here is we're going to put up a toast message. And a toast message is sort of like a message box, but it actually fades away. So we'll put up a toast, and we'll make the text. And we need to pass in a context, which is basically what is the owner of the toast message. In that case, it's this activity. And the message itself. And then it wants a length. And there is an enum for this, and it's just a short message, so we'll use the toast length short. And we want to show that. So we should be all good. We'll give it a build. And the build did succeed, and you'll note that that error went away. And now we're going to start it in the emulator. And I've already started the emulator up, so we'll use that. And I believe I mentioned before that the emulator is pretty slow to debug. So this is one of the negatives of actually debugging in the emulator. And in our next lesson, we'll actually see how to deploy to a real device. And there is our Hello World application. And if I click the button, this is our toast message.